Hey everybody, Bob Chick along with David Bay back for another installment of the Last Rep. David, lots of stuff to go on and over, so we will get right to it. First and foremost, we've seen a whole lot of speculation this week about our good friend George Farah and a lot of stuff going around on the boards and all that, anything from liver cancer to stage 4 colon cancer. I just got off the phone with George literally moments before we just went live on the air here. So I talked to George. He's in great spirits, feeling about as good as you can feel. He does have stage 4 colon and rectal cancer. Not great news, obviously. He does not have liver cancer or anything else. There's no other issues. He has been battling some of this for a little while. I talked to George a few months ago, and he was having some digestion issues, which was not unusual, as most people know his story when he was shot years ago a couple of times. Really did a number on his midsection, and they had to remove a whole lot of stuff and things like that. He's about as good spirits as they get. He's undergoing chemo right now, which he says is hell. And but he's very optimistic that he's going to actually beat this and come out on top. And if you know George, I wouldn't bet against him.
Yeah, I think that's kind of going to be everybody's sentiment, knowing what George has been through in the past and how much he had to fight, not to just recover from being shot, but I mean, he actually made it back on a bodybuilding stage, made it to the Olympia. So, if there's anybody who's going to turn around and kick this thing's ass, it's going to be George. And, he's anybody who knows George knows he's going to keep his head high and his spirits up throughout the entire thing. So thoughts, prayers, best wishes coming from my direction to George. But I'm fully confident that he's going to beat this and make a recovery.
Oh, yeah. Listen, he's battled just as bad, years ago with getting shot 3 times and all that stuff. So, and I was there for that. I mean, a lot of people don't know. Me and George come from the same gym, so we've known each other since we were, I think, just shy of teens. And he's a fighter, man. I tell you, this guy, he's very knowledgeable, as everybody knows, about the body. He's already told me he's changed his diet around. He's eating certain foods, anything that he can do to help the situation.
Sure.
Listen, George is a lot of things, but the one thing he's not is a quitter. He will never, ever lay down for this thing. So he tells me, he's like, look, bro, I'll be back in action before you know it. Trust me on this one. Yeah, and it's like I say, it's like, nah, he will, actually. There's no question in my mind. So like I say, our best and prayers out to George. I'll keep everybody updated. He's not in the hospital. He's actually at home, which is good and bad because Rochester got hit by that windstorm that you caught some of yesterday. And
yeah, it was nasty here, too.
Wow.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's a little nuts out there, man. But most of the town doesn't have power. Talked to some of my other buddies up in Rochester. They got just slammed up there, but luckily he's got a few houses, so he went to the one that did have power and a generator. So we give our best to George. And other news, well, what's been taking up most of the airwaves this week is this now infamous Dave Palumbo versus MD. I don't even know what you want to call it, debacle. Can I use that word?
Yeah, the Arnold Backstage Arnold stuff. Yeah, it's been a mess to say the least.
Yeah, well, listen, the funny thing is they've created kind of this war when one doesn't really exist, which I think is kind of funny. Here's the funny part. I was right in the middle of both of these guys. So I was literally in the middle, Flex Magazine, set up, doing our thing and all that with Chad Nichols and some of the great crew over there, Angelica, which, by the way, did a great job this weekend, last weekend. Dave was to my left, and Sean and the MD crew was to my right. So we're all about, the standard setup there, about 15 feet apart, really. So I watched the entire thing go down. Now, I don't want to go through it painstakingly. It's going to take up way too much of our valuable time. However, I will give you the bullet point synopsis. Another great word there for you.
Synapsis. I don't think I used the word synapsis a whole lot.
Add that to your repertoire, my friend.
I prefer scenario.
Scenario's good. But so here's what goes down, okay? Palumbo and his crew are over to my left. They're getting ready to interview Ahmad Ashkenani, who just won the 212, as everybody knows. This has taken an extraordinary long time because they literally weren't set up yet. So they were getting the camera out. Johnny and his crew were, getting the camera, getting on the tripod, getting the lighting set up. I mean, they're there a good 10, 12 minutes at least. That nothing's ready to go yet, kind of, whatever. Well, Sean Ray, at some point, and this is just purely speculation on my part, I actually haven't talked to Sean specifically about it, probably figures to himself, they were ready to go. I mean, they were just sit up and kind of standing there and waiting. I think what happens is he looks over and goes, well, why am I waiting? You know, and we can be done by the time they're even ready to go. He kind of shoots his way over there somehow, and he kind of wrangles them out of there. And the next thing you know, he's in front of their camera. And now Palumbo comes over with his mic, and he's obviously not in a good mood. You know, hey, what are you doing? You know, we're just getting ready to interview him. That's not cool. That's when Peter steps in. And so I don't think Peter saw the entire thing, but what he sees is Palumbo coming in. And, you know, they're kind of going back and forth with what I just thought was kind of an amusing scenario.
Right.
But that's how the whole thing unfolds. All right, ultimately, he ends up interviewing with them, and then I assume afterwards he went over to RX. Now, that said, the aftermath is more what I'm interested in. The stuff that Palumbo and Romano, first of all, Romano wasn't even there, so he's got really no say in the matter. Dave obviously was. Bottom line is this, though, bro. I mean, they're calling Peter, you know, that he's drunk, you know, all the things that you heard. Listen, that's just over the top. I mean, first of all, Peter was not drunk, I can assure you. Listen, I've seen Peter drunk many times, okay?
As have I.
Yeah, this wasn't it, all right? But no, listen, Peter's not a big fan of Palumbo or Romano. I mean, I think that's been pretty well documented over the years. So bottom line is, you know, listen, he stuck his 2 cents in there, and that was kind of it, you know. Listen, you want to have issue with that? I don't have any problem with that. Listen, don't start the most revered guy in our sport, sans bar none, okay, which Dave and John both gave credit to, actually, in that department. Don't sit there and say, you know, he was drunk or he must have been drunk to have acted like that. I got a scenario. Maybe Dave was drunk, because the way he was acting was not like something you would do normally. He was crazy. He was out of his mind. He was, you know, so maybe Dave was drunk.
No, you know, I tell you what, and I don't want to act like I was an instigator on this, but I think what's happening with RX is, you know, John and Dave went and said, you know, they had their claims and their beef with Stephen MD, which has gone on a very long time, which a lot of people, you know, including Peter, will say, let it go. But they had their beef with MD for such a long time, and they made a lot of claims, and I feel like a lot of people dismissed their claims. And then, you know, when I kind of came through and said my 2 cents after things ended, I think those guys were finally like, we told you so, you know? And so for as much tension as there was between MD and RX, I think that really amplified it, because I think after a lot of years, Dave and John were finally like, you know, like I said, I told you so. We've been saying it for years. Nobody believed us.
Vindicated, you know?
Vindicated. And so I think tensions at the Arnold between RX and MD ran unusually high, you know, and to give you guys like some little bit of backstage stuff, and there was always awkwardness between MD and RX at the shows, you know. I mean,
True.
Sean kind of got along with Dave, but Sean didn't get along with Chris Aceto, you know, and obviously because, you know, my position, things were always a little bit awkward with Dave, but he was nice to me, but he didn't like Steve. I mean, so there's always like this tension, this awkwardness. Everybody always got along with Johnny. Johnny's a character. But so there's always this little bit of awkwardness. And like I said, I think it really came to a hilt this weekend when we're doing interviews at the shows. And again, to give you guys a little bit of more, you know, kind of inside information, I guess. After the shows, if somebody's not a flex athlete, they're basically, or an MD athlete, they're basically open to RX and MD. And there's really no rules per se as far as who gets to interview who first. You know, we kind of try to be cordial and switch off. You know, Dave will interview the figure winner. We'll interview the bodybuilders. We'll flip flop. Sometimes there's just one person to interview and everybody's kind of standing around. So there is very much like this, who gets there first, who has their stuff set up, that's who's doing it. But, you know, there's a lot of work to be done after these shows. You know, when the show is over and the fans go out to dinner and everybody's done and whatever, we still have a couple hours of work. Interviews can take a long time sometimes. There's editing. There's all sorts of stuff. So there is definitely a rush to get things done and some tensions. So I understand how things broke out, you know, and how there were some frustrations. And I think what had happened was, I think, like you said, and I talked to some other people that were there as well, backstage, and basically say that they said the same thing, like all the stuff leading up to what we saw with Peter and Dave. Peter might not have seen it, and so what he saw was, you know, Dave kind of jumping in on this interview and rightfully so stepping in and saying, you know, it's not professional. He did, you know, emphasize that his biggest gripe, I think, was that Ahmad was kind of, it was awkward for Ahmad. Like Ahmad was kind of standing there like, and I think that was probably Peter's biggest gripe. You know, Peter understands the tensions between MD and RX, and And I think that was his biggest gripe, that this guy just won the biggest show of his life. It's his moment, and that was kind of stripped away from him. And granted, it was backstage, and
Thank
it was one
God.
of these things where had the cameras not been recording, nobody would have even seen that. So nobody would have had privy to that information that went on. But it was going on, and there was some awkwardness. But to touch on your point, yeah, I mean, I think regardless of, how Dave and John feel about MD as a whole, and obviously I have strong feelings there too. Peter out of the whole situation is probably the best move.
Well,
And
and don't disparage the guy and call him a drunk like he was staggering around. I mean, this was so so exaggerated. Like I said, I can make a case for Palumbo being drunk. He was acting irrational, bro. He was yelling. He was crazy. I mean, hey man, maybe this guy had a few drinks. But here's the bottom line, David. All the parties involved were wrong. Every one of them.
there you go.
Sean was wrong for going over there and doing that. I mean, listen, I know he was probably frustrated and sitting there going, "Hey man, we're already set up. Why am I waiting on these guys?" But he did what he did. He was in the wrong. Dave was in the wrong for following it up. Listen, what's the worst scenario? You're going to wait 5 minutes and interview the guy next? You could have stand there and chalked it up and man, that's a shitty thing to do, Sean. But what are you going to do? Peter was wrong in that he only saw kind of half of it. And, obviously let his frustrations out and make them count. So they're all wrong. You know what the bottom line is? I would tune in here to TLR or Flex Online. We're Switzerland.
We're Switzerland. We're Switzerland over here.
Bottom
Yeah,
line.
I mean, I'll be the first one to tell you guys, unless you're there, which I wasn't. Sometimes it's hard to make judgment calls. So I'm not going to make this person was right, that person was right. But I would, like I said, regardless of what Peter, interjected with, I would have rather have seen him left out of the conversation.
Yeah.
If John and Dave want to go after Sean or Steve or MD, and like I said, tensions were high. I'm fine with that. I mean, obviously Sean threw a few jabs at Dave, and Dave felt disrespected. Comments about their viewership, comments about getting them kicked out of the whole event. And so, Dave.
That's all crazy talk. I mean, listen. Here's the bottom line. Peter is.
If nothing else, it's got people talking. So
Listen, Peter is hands off. I don't care what he says. That's the bottom line. This guy is an icon on our sport. Even Palumbo and Romano admit it. This guy is kind of a last legacy of people from that era. We have very few of these people left. Of people that are revered in our sport. He's at the top of the list, along with Jim Mannion. And past that, bro, there's not a whole lot of people, that go back that far into our history in sport. So my only message and the final message we're going to speak on this to these guys, keep it professional, guys. You want to make commentary on what should have gone down, shouldn't, have at it. But let's not resort to, name calling and trying to tarnish, Peter and listen, later he was drunk, okay? I mean, we caught up at the bar and, he tossed a few back and Peter's got great stories when he's had a few. Trust me,
he's got great stories all the time. But him and his wife Ann, and I've had the pleasure of hanging out for dinners and drinks with them numerous times. They're as fun as you could possibly imagine. But you get a couple of drinks into Peter and Ann, and it is an instant party. So anybody who's been lucky enough to be in that situation knows what they're talking about. Peter's a great storyteller. To be honest with you, I really don't care if Sean and Dave throw low blows at each other all day. They can kick each other in the nuts from behind and do whatever they want. It's interesting to say the least. But yeah, I would just prefer that Peter be left out of all this stuff.
And don't mess with a stubborn old Brit, man, who's got
he'll throw down. And
hey.
one of the best Peter stories is that he's like, anytime he used to get in a fight when he was younger, he would take off his watch. He had some expensive watch, and he's like, anytime I was getting ready to take off my watch, he knew it was serious. So that's kind of a joke when things get heated. Like, all right, here we go. I'm gonna take my watch.
Well, on the more important things, but now that that's out there, hopefully,
the actual show there was a competition this last week.
That's right. There was an actual show. Yeah, overshadowed by all this garbage. But let's talk about the show. This was an interesting show. It was not the deepest lineup. We knew that from the start. We talked about that in the last episode. Going from the bottom up, we can skip through the bottom pretty quick. In 10th place, our good friend Will World Harris making his return to the stage. It's pretty much what I expected. Hats off to Will for trying, man, but this was not the show to be in.
No, and I think anytime you're going to do a return to the stage as an older gentleman, there's a level of respect that I think people are going to give you if you do your best, I guess. And with Kevin doing the Olympia, Kevin's legs might have not been where they were at, but his conditioning was pretty
Yeah.
incredible. And there was no question whatsoever as to whether Kevin put in the work that he needed to put in to get ready for the Olympia. And with Will's conditioning, regardless of age, we've seen plenty of guys well into their 50s and even older that were able to get incredible conditioning. So I think, I think Will could have done himself a little bit better service by showing up in a little bit better shape. But he did it, and he was there. And all that said, still an absolutely incredible physique for somebody his age.
Yeah, unfortunately, you don't get the for his age card when it comes to the Arnold.
When it
Listen,
comes to the second biggest show in
yeah.
bodybuilding.
So,
Yeah,
like I
so,
say, I love World Harris. Like I said, I've enjoyed many years with him at Gold's Venice. He's still a regular there, but a different show probably would have been better. Ninth place, Vitaly Fativ. Not much to talk about there. He's got some choice parts. The midsection is just horrendous.
yeah,
It takes away from the whole physique.
Yeah, Vitaly at his best. He did a show a few years ago. I forget which one it was. I don't know if it was the Arnold, but if he's really on and he keeps his midsection in control, he can be an impressive bodybuilder. But his last few outings,
It's
he
not
just
good.
hasn't been together at all, and he's letting his stomach get out of control. And I don't know what he's doing because he's never going to be I don't think one of the top contender. But if he puts it all together, he can look really good, and he just hasn't been doing that.
Luke Sando, I don't know a whole lot about. I did see some pre-contest pics. I thought he was fairly impressive. I was less than impressed at this show. He just looked, like he missed a mark. Smallish, a little flattish, a little not impressive.
Yeah, I've seen, I saw some pictures of him leading into the show, and this is obviously a story we've discussed a billion times over. And I thought Luke looked fantastic going into the show. A lot of fullness, a lot of vascularity. His conditioning looked good. I just think he missed the mark a little bit. And in the pre-show that we did, we discussed that a little bit with some of his shows leading into his pro card. He's been a little hit or miss when he's on. He's very impressive. He's got a thick upper body, but he was a little bit flat. So the size that he does carry, I don't think quite
Right.
was displayed as well as it could be. But I think he's one of these guys where he's gonna keep climbing up. I mean, he's got a lot of potential. He just turned pro. He knew he was diving into some deep water, even though it was
Sure.
not necessarily a deep lineup. It was still an Arnold. So not his best showing, but I still have very confident that Luke will bounce back and do some big things in the next few years.
Well, Michael Lockett ends up in the seventh place position. I talked to Michael a little bit at the meet and greet on Thursday. Now, this is something not a lot of people know, but he actually took this show. As everybody knows, there was some other names on the list that ended up pulling out. Sean Roden, Compton, Josh, from Australia. So he actually took this show on about 4 weeks' notice, which is a miracle in itself. But for anybody that knows Michael, he walks around in that kind of shape.
He does.
Literally 365. He was. I mean, listen, it was not the biggest Michael Lockett we've seen. He's basically said, "Look, I was kind of in off-season mode. It's nice to walk around like that in the off-season." And he actually gets bigger for shows because anybody that saw him can see he was in condition. He was just a little bit smallish, for him.
He usually is. Yeah.
But listen, I commend him for, like I say, taking that show and representing as well as he did with 2 weeks with 4 weeks notice. So good for Michael. Fawad Abiad ends up in sixth place. As we all know, Fawad suffered a leg injury, leg tear, muscle tear. I don't know, 4 weeks out of the show, maybe somewhere in that range. I thought he still looked pretty good, actually.
Yeah, no, he was big, he was full, got a good look against some of the other guys. I'm always probably, and we all do this in bodybuilding. You take the best showing you've ever seen, and every version of them that comes after that, you compare it to. And so I'm always going to have this picture of Fuad from that Europa where he, had stomach flu or whatever for 48 hours before and was absolutely peeled and shredded. But he looked good. He was full. His conditioning was pretty solid, I think. Obviously, he could have been a little bit leaner. I've seen his legs a little bit tighter in his back shots, again, after being severely dehydrated and, and having a stomach
Right.
flu. But he looked good, so for him to be, in that top six and get called out at the night show for that final comparison, he got to go down into the audience and do the pose
Yep.
down at the audience. So it was a big deal for Fuad, and considering that he battled through an injury, he should be pretty proud of himself.
Yeah, well done, Fuad. Juan Morel into our top five. Big Diesel back out on the stage. He took the better part of the later part of the year off last year. I thought the time off served him well. He looked fresh. He looked like he was back, to Juan. He's a big boy. I mean, he's got a lot of muscle. My one critique on Juan is that he needs to somehow, I don't know if it's a diet thing or a training thing, probably a combination, but not a lot of detail happens when he poses. He looks good, but when he actually hits a shot, I don't see a whole lot going on. I don't see the muscles kind of separating and all that. And it might be a training thing. I know guys who train particularly heavy, and Juan is very strong and does train very heavy, tend to lack sometimes in the detail department, separation of muscle bellies. So that might be my one critique. But I thought Juan looked pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, he, and I was following contest coverage everywhere, even at MD, but I was following contest coverage. Hey, look, I'm still a fan through and through. I wanted to follow as much contest coverage as I could, and a lot of guys kind of had the same thing. His legs were still a little bit downsized, and I think, look, guys, it's not like Juan hasn't been training his legs. It's not like he hasn't been busting his ass. So where he's at, I think he can still make improvements, but I think that's just the reality of Juan as a competitive bodybuilder, is that he's going to have an upper body that overpowers his legs. And that's that. He's still, obviously, I mean, the guy's been top 10 at the Olympia. He's won pro shows, top 5 at the New York Pro every time he's done it. Juan's an incredible bodybuilder, but, he has to be on the money. And he wasn't quite as sharp as we've seen him in the past. And I agree with you. He's, when he's standing there, everything kind of looks like he's ready to pop. And then when he hits the poses, it's just not that wow factor that we've seen from him. So he's one of these guys where, I don't think we're going to see him contending for an Arnold Classic title or an Olympia title. Can he contend for a New York Pro or a Chicago Pro or any other show? Absolutely. And that's, I mean, it's funny when guys talk about, tiers in the IFBB. Well, it's a tier 2 show or a tier 3. It's the IFBB, guys. It might not be the Arnold or the Olympia, but that's BS talk. And so, like I said, I think Juan could have been a little bit better. But he knows what he has to do. And, I don't know if it was obviously having Dallas McCarver in that lineup. I think everybody was trying to play the size game. And I think it's, and again, I think Juan could have been a little bit better. A couple guys placed ahead of him that he's beaten before, and I'm sure he's aware of that, and probably going to be trying to make adjustments for future shows. I don't know if he's doing Australia and Brazil, but there's a lot of stuff coming up, and so a lot of time for him to bounce back and really nail it.
I hope he's doing a couple of those shows because I think he could fare very well there. And Juan does tend to get better as he competes more throughout the year. So we'll keep watching out for Juan. I got a sneaky suspicion we'll see him back on the Olympia stage this year.
Yeah.
4th place, Lionel Bayecki. Best physique, best muscle bellies, best tie-ins, not the best condition. We've seen this from Lionel before. I did actually, when I was talking to George, of course, he can't help but, even though we're talking about cancer and such issues, that, he had to get into bodybuilding. And he says, yeah, Lionel, I wish I was there for my boy, but, he was very sick, apparently, before the show. Now, I don't mean like he got ill, the infamous, bird flu, whatever comes around, No, I mean like for a week before, or a week and a half, he's been sick, and he's still sick actually. Despite that, I mean, here's the problem: Lionel comes out, looks good initially. He does have a wow factor when he poses. A lot of stuff happening, especially with the front thighs and beautiful physique. But he fades, and he faded horribly. With each successive round, he seemed to get smoother and smoother, like he was losing it. Relegated him to 4th place, surely on shape and proportions, but all the tools, bro, just can't seem to nail it.
Yeah, and I'm not like I want to throw in the towel on somebody as talented as Lionel Bayecki, but he can't. To be honest with you, I don't think he can even use an excuse. He can't use any excuse anymore, because he just never shows up in really good shape. So he can say, "Oh, I was sick this time. I was dealing with these personal issues that time." And look, that stuff happens, and we've seen that before, where somebody comes in off, and you're like, "Wow, that's not characteristic of them." And Yeah, more, and a lot of these guys won't say anything leading into a show because they're hard workers and they're
Sure.
they're no BS guys. So the whole "I was sick" or that, and that stuff happens leading into a show. The guys, can legitimately use that. But when you show up over and over and over and over and over and over, not in shape, he really can't use excuses anymore. And so for Lionel, it's just like he's always going to show up and place well because he's a freak. But I think the fans are getting pretty disappointed with his just continual lack of bringing it, especially when there's so much potential. If he was just a mediocre bodybuilder that never showed up in shape, I think
Right.
people just like whatever. They don't care. But the fact that this guy could be Mr. Olympia and winning Arnold Classics and is just dropping the ball every time, I think that's what's frustrating people.
Well, he could have won this show. I mean, he has that good of a physique. Listen,
Win every show.
Cedric and Big Country were not 100%. So, I mean, the door was
No.
open. Lionel has enough size. I mean, he wasn't getting dwarfed by those guys. I mean, even though those guys are huge, he can hold his own, and he did. Thus the fourth place finish. But, yeah, he's got all the tools, man. Just got to. But a guy who did not disappoint. Actually, this was my player of the game right here. Mad Max Charles, bro. This guy was on the money, best conditioning out of everybody. Talk about making improvements. His legs have come up, and more importantly, much like we were talking about with Juan, the knock on Max before was that he was a big boy, but he didn't have a lot of separation. Well, tell you what, whatever changes he's made, he was hitting shots, stuff was coming out. Back detail, he actually stood there on his own with Cedric and Big Country in the back department, and I think he was beating both of them, all things considered. But big congratulations to Max Charles in third place, man. What a great finish for a guy who's made steady improvement all year.
Yeah, from what I saw, Max, it was one of his best showings to date, if not his best. I mean, he beat Juan, he beat Lionel, so he beat some guys that consistently have placed ahead of him, and he looked really good. And I was impressed. His most muscular is one of the most impressive that you're just going to see hands down, from his width to the way his delts cap off in his arms. But yeah, he looked good in his back shots. He's still got to work a little bit on his posing. He seems like he has a difficult time flipping out his rear double bicep, and that's been an issue for him. It's a little bit slow to get into the pose, but he looked really good. And so for somebody like him to place third place at the Arnold and walk away with that kind of, I mean, that's a nice paycheck for him too. I mean, from the business side of it, that's a pretty substantial payday for Max. And obviously that's part of this industry and this business. So, congratulations to him. And I think we'll probably see him walking away with some first place this year, and obviously back in the Olympia stage.
All right, well, on to the big boys. This caught nobody by surprise, as everybody was speculating it would come down to the battle of the big boys, and it didn't disappoint with almost 600 pounds between these guys. Big Country making, again, great improvements once again. You can do that when you're 25 years old, by the way.
Like a WWE announcer with tag team. They never announce individual weights.
No.
With a combined weight.
A combined weight from parts unknown.
From 300, 600 pounds.
From parts unknown. These guys look great. I mean, listen, neither one of them hit it 100%. Let's just get that out of the way, okay? Both had room to improve. Cedric came in bigger, which is a phenomenal physique, by the way. I mean, we've seen Cedric before when he comes in heavier, and he told me at the meet and greet, actually in the interview I did with Flex, that he was about 22 pounds up, which kind of made me a little bit nervous, because anytime you hear that, bro, you know what's coming. Either this guy's going to look phenomenal, or he's going to be fighting for last. He just completely missed it. Well, he didn't miss it. Like I say, he was there, but that big, full physique that Cedric's got, you look at it and you go, man, this guy should be giving Phil a run for the money at the Olympia. Now, that said, he gives up a lot in the conditioning department, which he would not be able to stand with Phil or any of the other top five guys. That physique he displayed at the Arnold, God bless him, and I give him all the credit in the world, probably fighting for 7th or 8th at the Olympia if you just put him on that stage in that conditioning.
Right.
When he goes down, though, and he's got that great crisp conditioning, he loses the fullness, and he's kind of stringy because he's tall, 6'2". You're going to lose that. So there's a fine line there with Cedric that, man, if he could ever catch it just down the middle, he will be fighting up there with Phil for that title. And Big Country, love this kid, man. Absolutely love Big Country. He is everything about what the next generation represents. He's big, great muscle, worked on his posing a lot in his presentation, which clearly came through. And most importantly, David, he was actually able to hang with Cedric from the back. I thought he was going to get destroyed when he turned around. I got to be honest, because his back, been a weak point, but he didn't. He stood his own.
Yeah, I think, and this isn't something that I know is being discussed a lot. And I think, obviously, Cedric winning an Arnold Classic, that's a dream for that guy, is a huge story. But to me, if I have to pick one biggest story out of this whole weekend, it's the fact that Dallas McCarver, I think, really legitimized himself as a top contender. Now, somebody might say, okay, well, he's already won shows. He got 8th at the Olympia. He's already a top contender. And my argument to that would have been there were questions about his back. That's the first thing I said, in our preview is, hey, he's going to turn around. He's not going to be able to hang with Cedric in his back shots. Dallas McCarver not only hung with Cedric in his back shots, but I mean, it was very comparable, if you ask me, in the rear lat spread and the rear double bicep. And why this is such a big story is because Dallas doesn't have any lagging anything anymore. No. So when you talk about Dallas McCarver as a competitive bodybuilder, there's not this, he needs to work on this or he needs to work on that as far as his structure or his muscularity. Dallas needs to nail his conditioning, and he can be a top 6 guy at the Olympia, which granted, it's a very deep lineup. So I think that's the big story of the weekend. Dallas McCarver came out, and he's no longer somebody with a weak body part who, is fighting for a top 10 spot. He's got all the tools now. He wasn't as lean as he needed to be. I thought it was a little bit funny when Dallas and Cedric were pointing at each other's butts, because I'm like, well, neither of you are.
Right.
But no, so for me, it was obviously it's hard to say somebody that's already as accomplished as Dallas to say it was a breakout show for him. But I think it was in some regards, because now it's like, okay, well, he's there.
Right.
And so I think it was an awesome showing for Dallas, showing that he can hang with the best in any pose. He's going to have to be sharper, and that's the same for Cedric. A lot of the guys talked, where does Cedric fit into the Olympia with the conditioning he brought to the Arnold stage, and I think it's exactly where he placed last time. He's going to be – Cedric is so genetically gifted, and he's so big, and his physique is just so symmetrical that he's always going to be a top 10 guy. I mean, he just – to have somebody with that much muscles, physique flow the way his does is incredible. And as far as our friend Phil Viz likes to talk silhouette bodybuilders, as far as silhouette bodybuilders,
he's number one.
They don't get any better. They don't get any better than Cedric McMillan. And so it was a good win for him. He's incredibly impressive. And and then there's the discussion, like, should a guy, when you look as good as Cedric does, should you have to be 0.2% body fat to win, or should should he be rewarded for that? I mean, where do you start? Where is the line between his physique is just that pretty and he's carrying that much mass and he's not as shredded as he needs to be? And that's a discussion that's going to be had from now until we get the results from the Olympia. But that all being said, if you look at the top 6 guys at the Olympia, Phil from the back is lights out as far as conditioning. So is Dexter Jackson. Yeah. So is Sean Roden. Ramy is just bigger than everybody else, and Ramy's conditioning from the front is pretty solid.
Sure.
Rulli is just so damn big, and he showed up so freaky at the Olympia this year that it's hard to put him anywhere but the top 6.
Sure.
So guys like Dallas and Cedric, those two are going to be really scrapping for those top 6 spots, and I think both of them can get there, but they both have to be peeled. And so for as good as Cedric is and for as pretty as physique is, when you put him next to guys like Phil or guys like Sean Roden or Dexter, the conditioning is going to expose him a little bit. But, and just one other thing I'd like to touch on with Cedric is his acceptance. I guess his acceptance, like Grammy speech, I thought was absolutely fantastic. It was nice to see him get up there, and he brought up some really good points. And, he's obviously everybody's talking about how great his physique is. I think he wanted to show respect to some of the other guys, and he brought up a good point about all the young bodybuilders watching, and 99.99 repeated % of us are never going to look like Cedric. And he said, these other guys, you can find inspiration in these other guys. A lot of people sitting in the audience say, hey, what, I might have a physique that's a lot more like Fuad's. And you know what? If I bust my ass like Fuad and I put in the work like him, you know what? Maybe there's a spot for me up there as well. So,
sure.
And obviously the interaction he had with Arnold Schwarzenegger was fantastic, making Arnold hit a pose up on stage, which side by side.
It was probably one of the best acceptance speeches I've heard, and overall, it was 98%. And I leave that 2% for our next discussion on the next TLR of some of the other antics that kind of some people think took away from that a little bit. And Cedric is Cedric. I love him. He's a great personality in the sport, with some of it a little over the top. Well, we'll get into that on the next edition of The Last Rep. But, David, we're running out of time. Quick shout out to Tony Doherty and his crew. I don't have the list yet of who's in Australia. I hope Big Country's going, or Cedric, or all of them, because it's a great opportunity, and Tony puts on a stellar show. Well, David, you are off to Hawaii, my friend. Actually, you're off in just a few minutes.
I got to catch a plane in about 2 hours from right now.
Right.
I've been emceeing NPC shows for about 10 years now, but this is my first time emceeing an IFBB show. It's a Tim Gardner show. So Tim, one of the guys that I've known since day one.
Sure.
In the industry, obviously, you helped facilitate this whole gig. So I'm really excited. I've never been to Hawaii. I've been all over, but I haven't been to Hawaii. And, I have a very short bucket list of places I still want to see. Pearl Harbor is one of them, just about 20 minutes from where we're going to be at. But I'm really excited. It's just going to be a great weekend. Some good lineups, and it's always fun to see Tim, JM, and Deb Mannion are going to be out there.
Nice.
Everybody said dinner and JM's a good guy, but his wife is where the real entertainment.
Oh, she's great. Yeah, I love Debbie.
Anybody who's had a few drinks with Debbie knows how much fun that is. So I'm excited.
Are you ready to go? Do you need any last minute advices or anything, or anything I can help with?
I guess I'm wondering how I should start off the show.
Well, I'm gonna give you a hint now. You've seen plenty of shows that I've done over the years. Obviously, you've stolen and pilfered everything I'm sure that you're going to be using there on the stage, which is fine. I'll give you a hint. There's a whole lot of sexy people there in attendance, David, that you may want to appeal to. All right.
It's my first IFBB emceeing gig, and so I promised you I would appeal to the sexy people in Honolulu, and so I will model my intro after the one that you've made famous.
Appreciate that, bro. But it's kind of a little shout out to me. It's like the Carol Burnett doing the ear thing, So, yeah, give me a quick shout out there, buddy. Best of luck. Best of luck to Tim Gardner and all the athletes competing in Hawaii. Go have some fun and get laid, bro.
That's the plan.
All right, you heard the plan, folks. For David Bay, this is Bob Chick for TLR. We're out.